Hey guys, what's up? I hope you all are doing great and welcome to yet another exciting video in the cards and payment series. So today we are going to talk about the disputes life cycle. Disputes is a very important topic in cards and payments. So if you are working on IT projects in cards and payments, or if you're working as a business analyst, or you're working as a system analyst or a developer, I'm sure that disputes is something that you may have always been wanted to be interested. And the next 20 minutes are going to be really helpful for you if you want to understand disputes. So without wasting any more time, let's get into action. So in today's video, we are going to cover the following topics. We will see an introduction to disputes in payments. The next is reason codes. So we'll look into a very specific entity called as reason codes, and we'll try to understand a little bit about the importance of a reason code in a disputed transaction. Then the third is stages in a dispute life cycle. So we'll look at each and every specific stage and what that stage actually means. Different network providers have a subtle difference in these stages, but by and large, the concept remains the same. We will also understand the flow of the events in a disputed life cycle. So I'll show you how the money movement happens when a transaction enters into a dispute. So how the money moves from one party to the other. This is a very important thing, especially for people from IT background who are working into projects that are into payments. I think this is a very important key concept. So make sure you pay enough attention to this one. And the last, I will share some links. These are useful links that you can use to go online and read a little bit more about disputes. All right. So let's get going. Right. So what is a dispute in payments? So as you can see here, um, you have a sale transaction, right? So there is a customer who has gone online because there is a sale happening. Let's say it's an e-commerce portal, and then there is a very good sale happening, say 50% off or buy one get one off, that kind of thing. And the customer actually makes a payment online, and the e-commerce merchant actually promises to deliver the goods back to the customer. Now, in the next stage, for some reason, the customer is not able to recognize this transaction, right? So the customer is shocked, he's confused, he doesn't know what's happening. Maybe the amount is something that he doesn't recognize on his statement. Could be anything, right? But eventually, the customer is actually not happy with this transaction. So he then thinks to raise a dispute, which is when he contacts different entities through his card issuing bank, and there is a process of investigation and proofs that then starts from there, right? So there is a lot of investigation that happens. Scanned copies of various receipts, etc., need to be provided, and the whole process is time taking. There are SLAs uh, that every entity has to adhere to, but then by and large, it's a time taking process. Um, so there is a series of responses from either parties, right? From the acquirer to the issuer. And well, each of the parties tries to say that, I have got sufficient proof for my client. So if it's a card issuing bank, it will say that I have got sufficient proof for my card holder. And if it's an acquirer, it will say that I have sufficient proof for the merchant. And then eventually, when the dispute reaches towards the end of its life cycle, there has to be a final decision that needs to be made, right? So it has to be made in favor of either of the parties, whether it's the cardholder, whether it's the merchant, we don't know, but one of the parties actually gets the money back. All right, so this is what typically happens in a disputed transaction. So reason codes, I mentioned this in the content. So let's quickly look at some of the bullet points on the reason codes. Various card scheme or network providers or issuers can have different reason codes. So obviously, when you have a disputed transaction, you want to link a reason code to it. Maybe, the issuer thinks that it's a fraudulent transaction, or the issuer thinks that the card holder was not physically present when the card was swiped, or the issuer thinks that the card holder has provided sufficient proof that this is not a legal transaction. So there are a multiple set of reason codes, right? And like I said, it could be network providers, which is basically your card schemes, or the issuers who can have these reason codes. Reason codes are divided into respective categories: example, disputes, frauds, authorization issues, processing errors, very common reason codes we see as processing errors as well. And then there is a link that I have given towards the end of the slide. I will also mention this link in the description. So you can actually go ahead and see on that website about the different reason codes, right? In fact, towards the end of the slide, I'll probably go to that website very quickly and walk you through. Reason codes can be changed in certain circumstances. For example, if the issuer feels that the reason code is not correct, then during pre-arbitration stage, it may change it to the appropriate one. So it's not that, once the reason code has been identified as, XYZ, it cannot be changed. Because when a reason code has been initially assigned to a particular disputed transaction, that's the initial assessment. And when there is a series of uh, conversation that happens and the exchange of messages that happen between the other parties, it could be that one of the parties decides that the reason code now should be changed because there is enough proof that has been provided that the earlier provided reason code was not correct. And then the last point is internal IT systems may have a different set of codes, right? So it's not necessary that whatever the reason code that one party has maps to the same for the other party. So I may be a bank and I may be issuing my card to my customers, and then there may be an acquirer who deals with me, but that acquirer might have a different set of reason codes as compared to mine. But then there is a sort of a mapping that I know, for example, if it's a fraudulent transaction in my system, which is called as 101, in the acquiring side, it might be called as something else. So there is sort of a parity there, but then uh, the reason codes could be different, right? But then we publish these reason codes to our external partners. If I'm a bank, once again, giving an example, if I'm a bank and if I'm issuing a reason code, the acquirer would know what that reason code is because I would have published in advance the list of these reason codes and what it means for me. So this is how we maintain these reason codes. And from time to time there is a revision. So if we are living in a world that's evolving every day, and with a lot of e-commerce transactions happening, day in day out, and especially in these COVID times when everybody has gone online, there might be a need to revise these reason codes and come up with the new ones. So it's an ever evolving process. So I'm here on this website where I can show you all the different sort of reason codes for different schemes, right? So on the right hand side, you can see all of the different schemes, and then on the left here, there's a list of reason codes. So you can see the first one talks about the reason codes for Visa, and the category is fraud. Now, Visa says that there could be a fraud depending upon the n number of reasons. So they have listed down these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different reasons, and there is a reason code like 10.1, 10.2, 10.3. There's a description, right? The first one says the cardholder is claiming that they did not authorize or participate in a transaction that you processed. So the cardholder has outrightly denied that he is a participant in this particular transaction, and therefore, when there is a dispute that happens, the reason code on that particular dispute is 10.1. And similarly, authorization, the transaction below was declined for some reason, so it will have an authorization code of 11.2 and so on and so forth. So likewise, you can see, right, for MasterCard, there is another set of fraudulent transactions. Um, Now, you see the description is typically the same, right? It says that the cardholder states that they or not anyone authorized by them engage in the transaction. So it's like the same thing, what you saw above for Visa. But you see the code is different here. And this is what I was explaining you before, that the reason codes, they change from scheme to scheme, but their their purpose remains the same, or the message remains the same, but the code might differ. So it's 4837 over here, for example, right? So there you could see that there was 10.2, for example, for Visa. So this is how it basically works out, right? So they all map, but they are different codes is what I'm trying to say. So go through this list. I have given the link in the description so you can go through and go through and see all of these different reason codes. So it's a good way of understanding what are the different kind of reason codes, especially you're working in projects which require you to extensively deal with the reason codes. Then it is a very helpful way to understand this. And there are multiple different ways you can Google and find out others, but this is a good one where I thought it talks about all the different reason codes for all the different schemes. So go through this, please. Let's quickly look at the stages in a dispute life cycle. I've given there are certain stages that I have mentioned over here. So, for example, you can see the first one says retrieval. Retrieval is when a cardholder or an issuer requests a copy of a transaction, um, when a charge is not recognized. So if I am a cardholder and I go to a bank and say, hey, bank, you issued me this credit card or the debit card, but I don't recognize this transaction. That is when the card issuing bank will start a retrieval request, which is basically asking for the details, right, for that particular transaction. And this happens through um, the communication channel that has been set. So the card issuing bank may contact the network or the scheme, and the network or the scheme may contact the acquiring site or in the acquiring bank, and this is how it works. Chargeback is the next stage where the cardholder or the issuing bank makes a demand to the merchant to put the credit back. So if the cardholder says that, this is a transaction that I don't recognize, then the issuing bank can make a demand to the merchant through the acquirer, right? So and then the amount has to be put back. And guys, if you are still not very sure about these entities, about merchants, acquirers, issuers, cardholders, I would strongly recommend you to see the first part of my cards and payment series video. It's a highly popular video. It explains you the manic model and how each of these entities play. So please make sure that you go to my channel, and then there is a separate playlist for cards and payments videos, and the first video over there is for this particular topic. So make sure you check it out. Okay, moving on. The next stage is the representment stage, where the merchant might disagree with the cardholder's claim, and the merchant says, "Well, I think this is a legal transaction, and I had provided these goods and services to the cardholder." And he provides all of that information in a contextual way, right? So he says that, this is what happened, and this is what I did, and these are my account statements, and you can clearly see, and this is the delivery order details, these are the courier details, and I can give you all the proof that the order was dispatched to the respective customer. So that's called as representment. So representment basically means the merchant is presenting his case once again. That's why we call it as representment, right? So there is another chance given to the merchant, and the merchant says, "Well, I don't agree. This is a valid transaction." The next stage is pre-arbitration, where if the decision is not in the favor of the merchant, then he can still appeal. So, like, uh, you know, the dispute can close at any of these stages. It's not that it has to go through all of these stages, right? So it could be that there is a chargeback that's made at stage number two, and the merchant agrees that yes, I should be reversing this charge for the customer, and I don't want to continue with this dispute process. So the dispute ends over there, and the amounts are settled, and the books are accordingly balanced. Or it could be that the dispute gets settled at the next stage called as representment. So it all depends really, right? So if at all, uh, in the representment stage, when the merchant makes a claim again, it doesn't go through, and the card issuing bank says, no, we don't agree with your claim, then the merchant has an option to go for a pre-arbitration where he can make an appeal once again, right? So he makes an appeal once again, and then all of the parties come into picture. The network knows about this because he's dealing with the process, right? So he's the one who is actually coordinating the communication on either sides, which is the acquiring side and the issuing side. So merchant is also watching all of this happening, and this is where um, the there is another chance, given to the merchant through the acquiring body or the acquiring bank, that he can make another claim. Uh, and if the things don't work out at this stage, right, and the merchant doesn't still get the money back, and the dispute is still open, then the final stage is the arbitration stage. Now, as the description of us here says, right, if either party, that is the cardholder or the merchant, disagree with the decision of pre-arbitration, then the dispute moves to an arbitration stage. Usually, in such cases, the network or the card scheme provider will provide its final decision. So, who is the network or the card scheme provider? It could be anybody. For example, it could be Visa, it could be MasterCard, it could be American Express. Um, all of these are network or the card scheme providers, right? So they now have the final authority to make a decision depending upon what they have seen in the case so far. They take into account all of the um, dispute stages that have happened, all of the proofs that were submitted, and then they make a final decision. That final decision should be abiding to all the parties, right? So the issuer or the merchant or the acquirer, they all have to agree to that particular decision, right? So eventually, the dispute has to be settled. It will not be a case that the dispute goes unsettled. So either of the parties gets the money back. And then in the end, I have mentioned here compliance actions. So these are additional actions that that are sometimes required. Now these typically vary from every bank or every scheme. It's not that all of these actions are always going to be there for all the Visas, Mastercards, and Amexes. It's not like that. It just varies, and these are actions that sometimes entities need to make for compliance reasons, right? So they don't affect the monetary transactions, or they don't affect the money movement, but these are all like actions that happen that they need to do for compliance. So now I will explain you how the money movement happens in a disputed transaction. In one of my earlier videos, I explained you about something called as the manic model, right? So if you have not seen that, I would request you to see that once again. But basically, what this means is this is all the different entities that are participants in a transaction. So this M stands for merchant, right? And A stands for acquirer. This is the network or the scheme. This is the issuer, and this is your card holder. Okay, so now in a disputed transaction, let's see what can really happen, right? So I'm going to draw a table over here so that we can actually see how the money movement changes, right, with each different dispute stage. So I'm going to say that this is my card holder, this is my merchant. Okay, let's say there was a sale transaction that happened, and the amount of the transaction was $100. Okay, now let's see how the money movement actually happens with each different dispute stage. And I will mention the dispute stage over here so we understand really what's happening. Okay, so the first one is the transaction that happened. This is obviously, your typical transaction that got settled. And let's say the transaction happened um, 2 weeks back, right? So this would have already got settled. Now the cardholder would see a debit of $100, and the merchant will see a credit of $100 on his side, right? Now, so far there is no dispute, obviously, right? This is where the transaction is settled. Now, at this stage, the cardholder realizes that he wants to raise a dispute because he doesn't identify this $100 transaction. So he starts with contacting his issuer. He gives a call to his issuing bank, who then raise a retrieval. So a retrieval is actually raised at this stage, and at this stage there is no money movement that happens, right? So it's just that the cardholder will contact the issuer and say that I don't recognize this, right? So there is a retrieval request that happens. Now the issuer will look into the case, and then depending upon the proof that the cardholder provides, he may want to raise a chargeback. So the next stage that happens is a chargeback. Now, in this chargeback, what happens is that the issuer will try to contact the merchant through the network and the acquiring side and say that I would like to raise a chargeback. Yeah, so this is where the chargeback goes, and then if the chargeback is successful, then the transaction is reversed. So now the cardholder is given his $100 back, and the merchant is debited the $100 from his account. This is only when the chargeback is successful. Then, um, obviously, right, we start going into the next stage, which is the representment case. So the representment is the next stage where the merchant is given another chance, and the merchant says, no, I still believe that this is a valid chance. This is a valid charge. and I have provided my services or the goods to the card holder, and I have got sufficient proof. So the merchant says that I would request you to put the $100 back on my account and let the transaction be as is as it was originally, right? Now, this is where the merchant then says, I have got this proof. So he makes a representment from this side, and then the representment flows all the way till the issuing side. Okay. Now, if for some reason merchant doesn't get through with the representment and the issuing side says no, we still don't agree with your proof, then you have the next stage called as pre-arbitration, where there is another chance given to the merchant. So in the pre-arbitration stage, the merchant is given another chance. Yeah, and we call it here as pre-arbitration, right? So the merchant is given another chance, and um, the issuing side says, okay, this is your final chance to say if you are having the proof and you are correct or not. And if the merchant wins this one, then at the pre-arbitration stage, the dispute gets closed and he gets the $100 still on his account. If the issuing bank still doesn't accept his proof, then the last stage on the dispute is called as arbitration. This is the final stage where the decision now lies with the network here. This is the sole authority now at the arbitration. Okay, so now at the arbitration, all the parties, this side, the acquiring side, and this side, the issuing side, they look up to the merchant and say, Boss, now you have to decide and let me know what's the final decision. So now it could go either ways, right? It could be that the card holder may win this, in which case he gets the money back, or he may not, in which case the merchant gets the money back, right? So it could be either ways, but this is the final decision, right? And then I talked about some other compliance actions, right? Which do not call for a money movement. So I will just say NA over here because there is no money movement. So you could see, right, this is a very important thing, especially for people who are working on payment related projects. They may want to understand how the money movement happens, because when you're talking to a business analyst or talking to your product owners from the customer side, they may be talking to you in this language, right? That oh, this is a retrieval case, this is a chargeback case, and therefore the money movement should happen in this direction and that direction. So I've tried to keep things very, very simple. What I will also do is I will add a slide, right? So I will add a slide next to it. I have color coded that. So if you want to take a pause in the video and just look at that slide, it's color coded. You may want to take a screenshot. Please do that, but it will help you to understand this whole process, right? So this is more like um, a monochrome handwritten diagram where I try to explain, but I have made another one where I've used some color coding. So I'm going to bring it up on the screen for a few seconds, and then maybe you want to just take a screen grab of that. So this is the manic model and the various dispute actions that can happen, the various dispute stages in the dispute life cycle. Like I said, I have color coded this, so please take a picture or a screenshot if you want to, and use it for your reference purposes. Let's move towards the end. These are some useful links that I found online, and I wanted to share these all with you as well. So these will be there in the description if you want to go over and read them through. So that's about it, guys. I will bring up this picture once again to end the video. I hope you like this video, and if you do like this video, I would request you to give me a like. And also, if you have a question or if you have a feedback, then please do leave a comment, because every single like or a dislike or a comment really, really motivates me to make these videos and help people. So please do that, and I will look forward to meeting you all in my next video. Thank you very much. Stay safe. Bye.